Well, with Halloween just right around the corner now, the creepy clown crisis is still growing.
From Michigan to Wisconsin to North Carolina, even right here in our region, the problem is so prevalent. One website has even created an interactive map of clown episodes that are being reported. Concerns have grown so much that even stores like Target have removed clown masks from their shelves, all out of sensitivity for the creepy clown scare.
Even McDonald's has decided now to scale back on appearances from their own mascot, Ronald McDonald. They say that they're just being thoughtful in respect to community events and the current climate around those clown sightings. So we are joined now by Melissa Manning-Long. She's the Director of Mental Health and Counseling, also a licensed psychologist, to talk about that whole creepy clown saga and how to deal with it specifically. And I asked Angela Bentley, who we have on the show all the time, if she could find someone to come talk about this, because I have a nephew who actually is talking about this constantly now, just 4 years old, and he's saying, you know, he sees them on the soccer field, and I mean, it's really affected him. So how, I think we think a lot of times kids don't pick up on this sort of thing, but they pick up on a lot more than we think.
Yeah. Kids are very tentative, and they pick up on a lot of things. They listen to people talk, they hear things in the news, and with media now, they can catch a lot of things. And even before the clown epidemic, we would see kids who had, fear of clowns, and especially when they're little. Like that, a fear of the unknown is a common thing. Right. And so with this, it's really unfortunate. Clowns are used a lot for therapy, for hospitals, when they've had earthquakes and they've had disasters and things like that, even the Red Cross brings in clowns. Right. And so to have this really can taint that a lot for children. And so it's very important for parents to be very diligent in how their children are reacting and to try to safeguard them with that.
So how do they do that? What can you do if your child is talking about this and they're developing that fear?
Parents need to be very attentive to their children. If they hear them saying something, or they hear them every time you say clown and they say, oh, that's creepy, that's scary, or you see signs of being scared, then there's several things that parents can do. One is they need to really limit their access to the media. They need to watch them being able to get on the internet. They need to watch older brothers and sisters who may be coming home from school and saying things to them. And then they need to sit down with their children. They need to put it in perspective with them. Sit down and listen to their fears and talk to them, being very realistic about what clowns really are there for, good things and happy things, and how this has started with a hoax and it's really got out of proportion. They need to also reassure them. They need to let them know the safeguards that they're taking. For me, my children were talking about trick-or-treating and clowns and what they were going to do, and I said, well, your dad and I will be with you. You will be safe, and we will take care of you. And we revisited talking about, clowns are safe in particular. It's just with this media thing that's going on with the clowns that's so scary. Yeah. So we reassure them.
And kids process things differently than we do, and sometimes it's easy to forget that, especially when you have older kids who are teenagers. Well, they forget that maybe their brother or sister processes things. They don't know that, and you can't really expect them to know that, but maybe it might be time to have that family discussion with the older members of the family, and even a spouse, and say, little Johnny or Janie's going to process this in a different way. Why is it so important to have those kind of meetings now to prevent that fear?
Because those fears really affect the developing brain, and they can be traumatizing, and they can cause problems for children to where they end up going in and needing counseling and maybe even medication, and being traumatizing for a lifetime. I know adults now that when they were little were afraid of clowns for whatever reason, and now they're still terrified. And I've even had adults come in and have certain phobias, and they need some assistance with it.
And you said right before we came on, I said, are you surprised that this got this far? And you said, we're really just disappointed. I mean, how did we get here?
I'm not sure how we got here. I think that it started as something little and maybe even as a hoax. And you have copycats that, oh, this is
That's
cool.
probably the biggest thing.
And it has just grown from there. And so I am really disappointed, because clowns are really symbol of happy things, and should be a thing of happiness for children in particular. And so it concerns me, you know, for the therapeutic uses of clowns, and that they may not be able to use those as effectively.
Right, and but we also know from history that this will eventually, the fad will fade, it will pass, and it won't be kind of the cool thing for you know, teenagers to dress up like clowns and go out and scare people. It'll pass and they'll move on to something else.
But the trauma can remain.
That's the thing,
That's
and
the
that's how you can help your kids. Yeah. See, you answered that exactly. I fed that line to you, threw a little softball, and you hit it right out of the park. That was perfect.
So how do we know then when there's a line between it will pass eventually? We know that, okay, it's causing some fear right now, but that it will pass. And when maybe a parent should really consider this as something more traumatic and more serious?
When it starts affecting that child's life at home or at school. When you have a child that is now afraid to go to school, they're afraid of being out of sight of the parent, they're afraid to go to bed at night, it's really time to do a little bit more intervention-wise with them, either by sitting down, talking to them, reassuring them, and sometimes you have to take them in for some therapy. If it's really disruptive in the home, it's really disruptive at school, then it's time to talk to a therapist and say, hey, what can I do, and get some advice there.
It's not just about clowns, but anything. In that sense, any subject.
And it's normal for little children to be afraid. Like, I know little children are afraid of Santa Claus, you know, at first, and they grow out of it. But when things get to the point that I don't want to go to the mall, or I don't want to go trick-or-treating, or I don't want to go out of the house, I don't want to go to school, it's time for intervention.
All right.
Makes sense.
Great conversation. Thank you so
Melissa.
much for joining us today to talk about this.
Thanks for having me.
We'll be right back.